I realize that this is quite an emotional hearing, and you're all human beings here. I appreciate that. And I know that you were sent here to listen to us. I can't promise you that I too am not going to get emotional, but I can promise you that as human beings, I respect your humanity. And I believe that the passion here in this room comes from us not feeling as though our humanity and the humanity of our children has been respected with the same degree. I share with Anna that the good Lord somehow blessed me with a path that I was able to stay on, having never even owned masks in our house, never had one on, and never put one on my daughter. But I recognized in the bonds that I've formed with many of the people in this room and were here earlier, that people come to a place of desperation where they feel they have no choice. And it pains me that a public body that upholds itself as one that is trying to instill trust, that holds itself up as an advocate for the defenseless, for the most vulnerable, would proceed forth with something that was so egregiously in violation of human rights, basic human rights for little children. And for the most vulnerable populations were the ones that were the most defenseless in this. The Providence School District was the last holdout that had to have the smackdown from the masterful attorney, Greg Piccirilli, when they were going to hold out and try to continue masking children. Providence, as some of the most vulnerable populations in our state, they couldn't come to a parents' union meeting. Some of them don't even have computers to figure out how to network with other people. So there's a whole broad spectrum of socioeconomic circumstances within the body of parents that were able to find each other. There's a diversity of races, all sorts of demographics of us came together for our kids, each of whom were all in a situation. So, if you just bear with me for one moment here. In addition to supporting pretty close to every other single word and point that was made here already, I just want to emphasize that the loss of trust in public health and unsupported public health recommendations and measures erode the trust in RIDOH. And I went through much of the stated RIDOH's leading priorities, strategies, and goals. The first publication of this that I found was from Nicole Alexander Scott, when she was still on our throne here. And then there has been just recently a follow-up it's not in a presentation form as far as I found, but this is from September of this past year. And it pretty much mirrors, I haven't been able to get through every point of it, but as far as I can tell, it mirrors this version from the former director. RIDOH's stated overarching goal is to positively demonstrate for Rhode Islanders the purpose and importance of public health. The leading priorities to support that overarching goal are listed as address socioeconomic and environmental determinants of health in Rhode Island, eliminate disparities of health in Rhode Island and promote health equity, ensure access to quality health services for Rhode Islanders, including our vulnerable populations. I would ask you, with respect to this proposed regulation, to explain how, considering the harms of mask mandates on children, does that line up with the overarching goal and the leading priorities of this body? As far as the leading priority of addressing the social and environmental determinants of health in Rhode Island, what are we considering in environmental health? And what kind of environment children are put into when they are rebreathing toxic bodily waste all day long? Would that be considered in a regulation when addressing determinants of environmental determinants of health? For the leading priority of eliminating the disparities of health in Rhode Island and promoting health equity, one of the examples of disparities that this leading priority attempts to target under a bullet point of race and ethnicity lists cancer, diabetes, and asthma. I would ask this body to consider how such a proposed regulation would take into consideration the effects of asthma on children who are an example of a disparity in being served by this body in our state. As far as the leading priority of ensuring access to quality health services for Rhode Islanders, including our vulnerable populations, one of the examples is ensuring access to care for maternal and child health. Again, we're supposed to be considering children in leading priorities of this body, and I would ask you to consider how this regulation takes into account the court-decided irreparable harm that these children have suffered. And I'm sure it's not lost on this body that even with such a turnout that we've had today, it's a fraction, obviously, of the hundreds of thousands of people in the state. But I'm sure it's not lost on you that if this many showed up to a 9 a.m. hearing on a weekday, that we represent exponentially more families that also experience that irreparable harm. It doesn't just apply to plaintiffs. I think the significance of the lawsuit speaks for itself that way. Supporting this overarching mission and these priorities are some strategies. There's listed 5 strategies. Promote healthy living for all through all stages of life. Ensure access to safe food, water, and healthy environments in all communities. Promote a comprehensive health system that a person can navigate, access, and afford. Prevent, investigate, control, and eliminate health hazards and emergent threats. And analyze and communicate data to improve the public's health. And I would like to draw special attention to the 4th and 5th ones of preventing, investigating, control, and eliminate health hazards and emergent threats. I would argue that that doesn't just apply to the threats from, for example, a virus, some sort of disease, but also from the hazards and emerging threats, from overreacting, or if you don't want to call it overreacting, I guess the saying goes sometimes that the cure is worse than the, what's the term? The cure is worse than the disease sometimes. So it asks how this regulation would attempt to address negative outcomes from reacting to some emergent health threats and not others. Strategy number 4, prevent, investigate, control, and eliminate health hazards and emerging threats. Again, just touching on another point outlined by this body, says minimize exposure to traumatic experiences such as bullying, violence, and neglect. I think it's clear that the experiences that many children and families experienced as a result of the mask mandate were traumatic. They experienced what is overwhelming for me to think about sometimes, the bullying from adults, about the pain and the suffering and the traumatic experiences that they were going through. The dismissal of that, the mocking, the scorn, the denial from adults across the state was utterly dehumanizing. So I ask you to pay attention to your own bullet points under strategy number 4.